Hey everyone, how's it going today? And welcome back to another second stimulus check and second stimulus package, unemployment benefits extension update, and happy Friday. So in today's update, I really just want to give you guys a hopefully much more chill, easygoing update where we just talk a little bit about everything that really happened this last recent week, a little bit like a recap, and then also maybe ending this talking a little bit about what to happen, what to expect next week. Because obviously, as some of you guys may or may not know by now, as crazy as it is to think, is that next week is going to be the final full week before elections, and you can even say this is maybe the season finale, or maybe you can count the elections as maybe the season finale slash final showdown face-off. So next week would basically be like the penultimate, second to last session episode week that will finally lead up to the finale that we've basically been waiting for, which is the elections. But it is supposedly going to be a big week because it's the final week that we finally see whether or not we'll be able to see the stimulus check and stimulus package passed right before the elections. The great news is that there still is a lot of optimism. The neutral and maybe much harder to take in news is that there are still certain difficulties that are going on. I might dive more into that in a future update. But as always, if you are brand new here, consider subscribing and hitting the bell notification button for future updates on stimulus checks and other finance topics. Consider smashing the like button because it really does help to support this channel, and it is greatly appreciated. And feel free also, as always, to comment any questions, thoughts about anything at any time, and also maybe about whether or not you think we'll finally be able to see a stimulus check slash second stimulus package approved and finalized by elections, which is basically by the end of next week, more or less. Now, I did also do a poll on my regular channel, on my channel, where basically if you just go to my channel in the communities tab, I did make a poll where basically asking all sorts of different people about when we think that we're going to be able to see a stimulus check or stimulus package, whether or not we're going to see it before elections, after elections, but before the end of this year, or maybe even next year, or maybe just something out of the blue just pops up. Because I always say is that this really is a year full of a lot of uncertainty, so I always say is to just hope for the absolute best, but just keep expectations very, very humble, because I think this has been a year where things can just pop. Whether this is like a brand new Twitter tweet, some kind of natural disaster event, something that's going to be going on. This is even more true because with the elections coming up, I think that a lot of people are predicting a lot of moments of kind of uncertainty about how everyone is going to react to both the elections and the election results, whether or not they are going to get contested. Now, I did actually also make a previous video last time, I think literally just yesterday. If you haven't checked it out, I did make another video which I think is really for anyone that wants to keep up with the news, but also particularly if you are struggling with something right now. In my last episode, I basically talked a little bit about everything going on in the world right now, and about how in a lot of past videos, I talked a little about how if you are going through something difficult right now, the biggest important thing to realize is that what's somewhat more comforting is that you're probably not alone, and that there's probably, if anything, many millions of people that are going through some kind of difficulty right now. So it's at least hopefully a little bit more comforting to know that there are many millions, if anything, people that are also with you. In that episode, I dive much more deep, and I'll put it at the end screen as well. It's the video that's called Be Prepared, and it just talks about everything that's going on in the world right now, from everything such as unemployment, from businesses, economic, unemployment, socially with the pandemic, all of the different hardships, and it also explains why. Because I feel that there's so much upcoming anticipated difficulties that some people aren't even fully thinking about right now, that I think that the need for stimulus checks and stimulus package is even greater now than it's ever been. I mean, the urgency technically has already been. We should have, this is something that should have been urgently needed for the last weeks or even months, at the very least, but now even more so than ever. So with that being said, let's get this video rolling and started. So really the fast recap is basically on Monday and Tuesday, Pelosi implemented the 48-hour deadline to try to approve and pass the stimulus package before the elections would happen. The great news is that they did make a lot of progress. However, of course, there are still a couple of things that have been holding it up, which we'll talk about maybe in a little bit, if anything, in a future episode. Wednesday was basically when the skinny bill was basically voted on. The skinny bill, as expected, it really was a filler bill, and to no surprise, it was basically blocked. I believe the skinny bill basically lost in a vote of 52 to 44. They needed 60 votes, so they were basically shy of about 8 votes. I don't think most people expected it to really pass anyway, but it was really just there for filler-based reasons. There are a lot of people though that do say that actually, and this is really about stimulus checks in general, that the reality is that if we had different people inside of Congress, inside of the House, inside of the Senate, and maybe even inside of the White House, because I say this because I know Donald Trump actually does support stimulus checks, so that is a great news, and he's even tried to preach about going something higher. But the reality is, especially with Congress, I think, is a lot of people can agree and feel that if we had different people inside of Congress, that maybe could have made the difference of those 8 votes. Not necessarily with the skinny bill, because of course, again, the skinny bill is, well, skinny, and I think we wanted something bigger, but certainly even for almost every bill that has basically come before, during, and even after the skinny bill that we have been basically trying to pass and approve. That's also why so many people are really preaching about why it's so important to vote in this election, because the people that win in this election, and not just the president, but actually even the people in Congress, especially the Senate, because the Senate has basically the most amount of people that are currently hesitant about doing all of the stimulus package, and one of the biggest reasons why we've been struggling with this entire time. So the elections might actually be potentially the few times that we will have a little bit more power to maybe hopefully change the people that are inside, to make it different for the coming future years, generation, or even months at this point. Thursday, which is yesterday, was the presidential debate, so that was a lot more interesting and peaceful to watch compared to the first one. And they also did mention stuff about the stimulus checks and stimulus package. It probably was as expected. Basically what ended up happening is, in that debate, they asked about the stimulus checks. Trump basically said it's Nancy Pelosi's fault, to no surprise. Biden basically said it's the Senate and the Republicans' fault. So this really was kind of just an expected kind of exchange. We did also release unemployment numbers yesterday, like the most recent unemployment. I believe it was something around 700,000 to 800,000 people filed for the regular unemployment. Then there were other unemployment programs. In total, there probably was about 1 million people that filed for unemployment yesterday, or in the last week, that came out from the numbers that came out yesterday. So that's another reason why I always say is that there's a lot of people that are struggling right now in this country, and why there's an even greater need for stimulus checks and stimulus package now more than ever. And again, I'll probably put that episode where I kind of just talk about everything going on maybe at the end of this video in like the thumb screen, end screen. It's called Be Prepared. It came out literally yesterday. But for next week, really what's going to be going on next week is that really the talks are going to be still continuing. I know that Pelosi still feels relatively optimistic, although I will admit though that the optimism, I think, is starting to really level just because of the current situation. So next week, what it really is that the talks are going to be continuing. They're going to be trying to hopefully close that gap with the finishing touches, because as we've mentioned before in the past, the Republicans are at 1.9 trillion, the Democrats are at 2.2 trillion. There is actually something that I'm actually very afraid of, that I think can actually, and it technically has already been happening, that may potentially put a stall on the stimulus checks and stimulus package. I'll talk probably more about that in a future episode, so once again, subscribe if you are brand new here for that, because it does dive a little bit deep into it. But really what it is that it kind of just has to do with a lot of the political divide that's currently happening right now. And this was also apparent literally in the debates yesterday, because you can, exactly as you can see in the debates yesterday, how really it became like basically some kind of conflict of both sides fighting each other and accusing each other of different problems and things that have been going on, basically, instead of trying to sit down and come up with some kind of hopefully more mature compromise for the sake of millions of people. But the crazy thing is that, for many of us, we voted for some of these people, but maybe you can argue that, this maybe wasn't necessarily the right or not the right decision, but maybe it was just because of who we have, because of the options that we currently have for who to vote for. Maybe they were just basically the best or the least detrimental of the detrimental, basically. But basically the bottom line is that next week is going to be the final push for stimulus checks and stimulus package. I do know Trump is hoping to finally step in and do a certain something, so we're going to have to see what he tries to do. But I do know is that I think it's because he also knows deep down that there's such a need for stimulus checks to maybe be able to up his chances at the elections, especially because he's actually a little bit down right now. Now granted, I think it's going to be a very close race, and in this 1 week a lot of things can change. It certainly changed in 2016, and so that's kind of what next week is going to be about. Continuing talks, the final push, the final couple of debates, trying to close that gap of the couple finishing touches, and then of course leading us into the final week, which is the next week, which is going to be the elections, as crazy as the thing. But next week we're going to talk a little bit more about what's currently going on. I'll give you guys brand new updates. We'll talk maybe a little bit about why, specifically diving deep, why we've been having such a long stall with everything in stimulus check, stimulus package. So definitely subscribe for more if you are interested. Remember to smash the like button if you haven't done so. Feel free to comment any questions, thoughts, whether or not you think we'll see stimulus checks. I do have a poll on my communities on my channel, so feel free to check that out if you are interested, and also to hear what other people feel and have to say. Thank you guys so much for watching. Stay safe as always, and have a great upcoming weekend. Thank you guys so much again.